Standing by. The Terry and Ted podcast is sponsored by Jaguar Land Rover Laval. Get out of the big city and experience a construction zone free test drive. There is such a thing.
I was just saying to Ted Bird today at a lunch stop, where did the week go, Ted?
Cleveland.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is episode 10 of season 2. I'm going to tell you a behind-the-scenes story that'll bore the shit out of you, but I'm going to tell it anyway.
Standing by.
We record these episodes over the course of a week, and it feels like I just got here. And, of course, the 20 centimeters of snow last night made me feel like I didn't just get here. That made me feel like, it was terrible winter weather.
And that was your fault, by the way.
It was.
The 20 centimeters of snow.
Yeah, because the weather in BC when I left was beautiful and stayed beautiful and is supposed to get shitty upon my return.
Yeah. Now, by the time you're watching this or listening to this, it's the springtime.
Yeah.
But when we recorded, the day we recorded, there were we got about 20 centimeters of snow with strong, icy blowing winds as well for your added winter enjoyment.
And I would just like to say how much I enjoyed recording. Well, I know we're not done yet because we're excited about episode 10. We have another guest coming. But this has been a hoot and a half, and I don't mean maybe.
It always is.
Yep.
And we're lucky to have this facility. We're lucky to have Poseidon, our producer.
Yep. And
Pantelis and Mike Ward, who have been our congenial hosts.
Yes.
And we're lucky dogs. I'm a lucky dog.
I said to Ted, I don't know, maybe there'll be a season 2. I wonder if the sponsors will be interested. And they were.
They sure were.
From our friends at Matelas Bonheur, the Mersons, and our new sponsor, the UPS Store Canada, and of course, our
title sponsor,
Jaguar Land Rover Laval. And we'll start by thanking them, Ted.
Every time Terry comes into town to record these podcasts, they give us a courtesy vehicle for me to, thanks for letting that go, for me to ferry Terry around town in. And this time around, they gave me the Discovery Sport, which was perfect for this weather.
Yeah, no kidding.
Absolutely perfect. And interestingly, we discovered today it's also invisible.
Yes.
It's a stealth vehicle. We were in the parking lot of a shopping mall. We had just popped in for a bite to eat, and as we were exiting, people just kept turning right in front of us.
Trying to drive into us.
Yeah, like we weren't even there.
Yeah.
And then a lady walked right out in front of us, and I thought, boy, oh boy, this is like, this thing's got stealth capability.
After I said, what are we, fucking fog?
How could you not see the big black SUV?
Yeah.
But apparently,
man, it's great in the snow.
Oh, it sure
boy,
is,
it sure was great to have.
Well, listen, in the climate that we live in Montreal, Land Rover's all you need.
Yep.
There's nowhere you can't go at no time of the year, at any time of the year. You know what I'm trying to say? In a Land Rover. And you can go see them at Land Rover Laval. You can see them online, landroverlaval.ca and jaguarlaval.ca. And our thanks to Nino and Renato Di Cubelis, the owners of that fine dealership, and Adrian McGrath, their marketing director, who's our biggest fan and keeps us in those beautiful luxury vehicles. Thank you, Adrian.
Yes, thank you, Adrian. Like we said, we love a family-run business, and you can go experience that for yourself. They'll welcome you, even if you're just looking. They'd be
they'd be happy to see you, and they'll fix you up with an espresso, and maybe even go over to the other side and look at the McLarens.
Now, I wanted to mention this because this is one of the things that I haven't had a chance to mention over the week, and I want to mention this one more time before I go. I saw my great and good pal, Kevin McDonald, today. Kevin's an old friend. We've known each other since grade 9, and he was in town doing business, and we had a quick sandwich together, and we were talking. We somehow got talking about minor league hockey teams, and I asked him, and I'm going to ask you if you've ever seen the Netflix series called Untold Crime and Penalties.
I have not.
Have you not seen this?
No.
You have to watch this. Now listen to me.
I'm listening.
Listen to me good.
Yes, Father.
If you're a hockey fan, and I preface this is not your average hockey story. As a matter of fact, it's almost an unbelievable story.
Is it a documentary?
It is.
Okay.
It's a documentary, I think, in 4 parts. And it came out 6 months ago. I watched it. My dad, who's the world's biggest hockey fan, still playing hockey at the age of 86.
That's unbelievable.
I said, Dad, if you should watch this. I said, it's a bit unseemly and unsavory.
Okay.
And you may not love all of it. But if you love the game of hockey, if you watched hockey, played hockey, been to a hockey game, understand hockey, you have to watch this. This is the story of a mob boss. This is a true story of a mob boss who bought his 17-year-old son a hockey team.
A minor league hockey team?
Yeah, called the Danbury Trashers.
Okay.
And the 17...
ECHL? Do you know?
I think.
East Coast Hockey League?
I think ECHL.
Yeah, okay.
And he made his 17-year-old son the president and general manager. And the story that ensues is fascinating, jaw-dropping, almost unbelievable, hilarious at times, and vile at times.
Okay.
It's kind of like a real-life version of Slapshot, complete with some French-Canadian characters and other characters who have, never made the big time but are still trying.
Slapshot meets The Sopranos, maybe?
Kind of.
Yeah.
That's a really good description, Ted. I highly recommend this thing. If you're on Netflix, Crime and Penalties.
Is it a one-off or is it a series?
It's not a series. It's not.
But is it in several parts?
Yeah, it's in several parts. It's a documentary. It's not, it's not a drama.
Yeah.
It hasn't been reenacted. It's a documentary of what happened in the 90s in Danbury. And if you love the game of hockey, you will not believe your eyes.
Where's Danbury now?
Connecticut. Yeah. It's really, really something. And I needed to recommend it before we ran out of episodes in season 2.
Now, has your father watched any of it and gotten back to you?
Yeah, he I wouldn't say he enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Because some of it is just unbelievable, starting with the violence on the ice.
Yeah. Your dad is a very morally upstanding man.
Yes, and my father appreciates the elegance of the game.
Right.
He was a big fan of Jean Beliveau, for example, and the Rocket, and Gordie Howe was, he also was an elegant skater, but was a little bit more bull in the china shop.
Yeah. You didn't mess with Gordie Howe. Can I tell the Gordie Howe Phil Esposito story?
I was just going to ask you if you would.
I didn't get a chance to tell Chris Nyland this story when we had him on the podcast, but I was telling him afterwards. Outside of the studio, I asked him if he had read Phil Esposito's book, and he had not. Phil Esposito tells a story in his book about when he first broke into the NHL, and this would have been late 50s, early 60s, and he's a rookie with the Chicago Blackhawks, and he's on left wing. And they're playing the Detroit Red Wings, and he lines up for a face-off, and he looks, and there's Gordie Howe on right wing for the Red Wings, right beside him, and he's going. And it's his, oh, my God, I've made it to the big-time moment. I'm facing off next to Gordie Howe, and the linesman drops the puck, and the puck doesn't even hit the ice before Gordie Howe plants an elbow right between Phil Esposito's eyes, right at the top of his nose. And Phil Esposito says all he saw was stars, and he felt this sharp pain and tears running down his face. And he said he started to chase Gordie Howe around the ice while the play was going on, going, "You fucking cocksucker! You were my fucking hero!"
And I think it might have been Gordie Howe's "Welcome to the big league," kid?
Well, that's exactly what it was. Yeah, that was Gordie Howe's "Welcome to the NHL" moment for Phil Esposito.
Yeah, we. I wanted to say thanks, by the way, to Chris Nyland. Make sure I don't forget anybody. Chris Nyland, Maureen Holloway, Pantelis,
Mark
Cassidy from La Presse, Tommy Schnurmacher, and
Guido
Grasso.
I don't know if we've forgotten anyone.
Did we get it? We got everybody. Poseidon, I think.
Here's hoping.
Did you guys mention Maureen?
Yes.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
It was.
Who else?
It was fun to have guests, and we had a couple that we couldn't scoop up, but maybe if there is a season 3, we'll get to that. Ted, do tell, what is the history of your pullover that you have today?
This pullover, and let me show you the back of it.
Okay.
This was a parting gift when I left K103 in Ganawage. Mm-hmm. The Legion in Ganawage, Mohawk Legion Branch 219.
Yes. Oh, isn't that something? That's beautiful.
They gave me that as a gift,
that's
which
very
was very
nice.
nice because they know that I'm a supporter of the military.
Yes.
And there's a strong military, a strong veteran presence in Ganawage, and a very interesting veteran presence as well, because as Mohawks, they have the option of joining the Canadian or the U.S. military, and most of them over the years have gone the American route, and most of the ones who've gone the American route have gone U.S. Marines, because the Mohawk culture is a warrior culture, and the Marines are the tip of the spear.
Yep.
So that's where they want to be, and I know a lot of guys and gals over there who've served in the U.S. Marines.
What are we going to do about the Legions, Ted? They're really struggling, a lot of them.
Well, that's a good question, and maybe it's a question that we could put to our guest today, because he might be more clued in to that than I am. I think Mohawk Legion Branch 219 in Ganawage is doing well, though.
Yep.
I've gone over to their last two Remembrance Day ceremonies, which they don't hold right on Remembrance Day. They hold it, it's a little bit before usually. And it's a really interesting ceremony because it incorporates Mohawk culture, Canadian military culture, and U.S. military culture all at the same time. The Black Watch Pipes and Drums leads the march from the Legion down to the Cenotaph. And at the Cenotaph, they have the Last Post, which is the British sort of, I'm getting this wrong, David's going to kill me. It's like the lament, the trumpet lament for the fallen, and then they have taps, which is the American lament for the fallen, and then they have drums and singers, native drums and singers, and it's quite moving. And let's talk about something else, or I'm going to cry.
I see that.
Anyway, just
Covered on
another
an earlier podcast.
This is a valued souvenir from my time in Ganawage.
Yes.
I love that community, let me tell you.
Yeah, and they love you.
They seem to. They
Yes.
like to give me the gears when I go back over. They always go, somebody always says, I thought we got rid of you. But it's usually in good humor.
Why don't we take this opportunity to welcome our guest then, Ted, now that we've talked about it?
Let's do the tweet sheet very quickly before
I've
we do
forgotten
that.
about that. You know-
so
you
we
know
can get
why?
that out of the way. Why?
I never come to rehearsal.
I know you don't. Mr. Big Shot, he waltzes in at the last minute, eh, Poseidon? Yeah.
Yeah.
The tweet sheet's a little thing I do on my radio show on Light 106.7, where
And
I
it's a new feature for us.
new
here
feature on the podcast,
Yes.
and on the podcast I'm able to use some of the tweets that I can't use on the radio, because if I did, the station would lose its license and I'd be out of a job.
Yes, sir.
So I use some of those here on the show, and also some that aren't so salty, but that I think would make Terry laugh. So we've got 3 for you here now.
Alrighty.
Let's have a look at them and see what we've got. From at Katie, is that Katie Delaney?
Katie Delaney.
I love when people say shit like, your dog loves you so much, he knows how lucky he is to have you. No, he doesn't. My dog rocks, but let's be clear, he has no fucking idea what's going on ever.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah. Oy, what else we got here? From at Salty McTavish. He had salt and pepper hair and oregano eyebrows. His lips were basil leaves. His entire head was a jar of Italian seasoning. Well written, eh?
Yeah.
And from at the hat store, about to have sex. Her, I can tell this is your first time. Me, Shush's marching band. What?
That's the tweet sheet, the podcast version. Don't forget to listen to Ted on his morning show at Light 106.
106.7 FM, online at light1067.ca, on the iHeartRadio app, and on your smart speaker.
And don't forget to listen to me getting out of my chair weekday mornings.
At about, I don't know, 9:30, 10. All right, do you want to say hi to David O'Keefe?
I do.
How do you do, David O'Keefe?
Hi, David.
Well, hi, gents. How are you?
We're fine and dandy, I think.
I don't even know where to start, Dave, in introducing you. History professor, author, broadcaster. What am I missing?
Writer.
You've done a lot. And you continue to
Old
do a lot.
Yeah, just go on. Yeah, no, that's fine. That's
Please go on about me.
Please, keep going.
Writer? You didn't say writer. Did you say
Well,
writer?
he's a writer for sure. Yeah, well, I said author.
Okay.
So
Oh, you
authors,
did
as
say-
a rule, generally write.
Is
Yeah.
an author a writer?
It is, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
David's field of expertise is military history, Canadian military history, World Wars I and II. Probably more two than one, though. Would you say, Dave?
Yeah, definitely too.
Yeah. If you ever want to be bored stiff, go on a long car ride with me and David, while we discuss the merits of the 12th SS and their battlefield proficiency versus their morality off the battlefield. And surely you'll be saying, could you let me off here? I'll just get on the bus.
I got to pee right now.
Yeah. How are you, Dave?
Good. Can't complain. The snow has kept me down here in my bunker. I mean, first it was Omicron, now it's this. So.
Now, how does the pandemic affect a professor or an educator?
Well, when it started, we were online exclusively. So in other words, this is the way I was teaching the entire time. But then in September, we went back. But it's kind of like mercenary teaching. In other words, we come in directly to our classes, teach our classes, masks, everything, boom, and we're gone. So we're still dealing with our students, but we're dealing with them like this when it comes to office hours and things like that. So, today wasn't bad. We kind of had a bit of an option because of the snow. So, we went online for what we had to do. So, there's some good things that come out of it, but there's nothing like being in the classroom.
David, speaking of that, what's the state of the current generation vis-a-vis interest in history and making a generation that's getting farther and farther away from D-Day understand what took place and how important it is? Is there a high level of curiosity still, like when we were kids?
Without a doubt, yeah. That's
Great.
the fascinating part. And it's not like they're coming in like when we came into it and we learned about World War II. I mean, let's face it, our parents, our grandparents were involved with it. It was something that was kind of ever present in our life. Now it's not, but the curiosity is still there, which is amazing. But I find myself, like, for instance, when Ted and I get together, there's a lot of things we don't have to discuss at a very basic level. But, for instance, I'm teaching a World War II course at the college, and I have to start off with a complete explanation of World War I. I can't just take it for granted anymore that people understand that World War I was 1914 to 18, right? So you've got to really build things up now. And that's about the only thing that I would find is a challenge, but the curiosity is there. And once you open the door, holy God, the interest is insane. It's off the charts.
I'm curious because I've been faced with this a number of times, always been fascinated by younger cousins, younger people around a table with a glass of wine, and you get into these discussions with, my buddies, bright kids or something. And what I've been faced with a number of times that's come out of kids that were in university is, well, history's written by the victors. So I don't know how true all of that is. Do you face that? And how do you counter that?
Well, to a certain degree. I mean, look, there's many schools of thought in history, and that's one. I would argue it's the most cynical one. I mean, the best part about doing it is if you can get people into the archives and see the evidence themselves. And
Right.
It sounds funny.
Right.
Like, I mean, this sounds like, Ted and I on the road trip, but no, not at all. And I always tell my students this, actually getting into an archive where you see the documents that were created about an event that happened 80 years, 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's, I always tell them it's kind of like an Indiana Jones moment, In
Right.
other words, plenty of Nazis, no snakes. But at the same time, you never know when you turn the page how your understanding may change as well. So there's an intoxicating nature. So when anybody sort of says something like that, where they're completely dismissive and cynical, the best thing to do is just get them involved with actually researching. And you can do that online now. So much has been digitized. So much is available now for anybody who would sort of doubt the beauty of history, as I call it.
Right.
Is it dry though, Dave, when you're going through those archives? Like, is the material just, you know what I mean by dry, right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
it doesn't jump
there's
off
some
the
of it.
page
I mean,
at
you
you.
can imagine the Army wasn't writing a drama.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's, there's a lot of what we call Army bump. But at the same time, depending on what you're looking at, sometimes, when you're flipping through pages of a war diary, and every unit in the Canadian Army, the British Army, the American Army used to keep war diaries. Some of them are very matter of fact. In other words, weather today was this, weather today was that, and that's about it. And then you get others, like the Calgary Highlanders War Diary here in Canada. Every day is 5 pages of beautiful flowing prose about everything, from command to the weather to the Germans to this to that, and it just takes you right back. So it's nowhere near as dry as you'd probably think it is.
You know who was in the Calgary Highlanders was the late Gordon Atkinson.
Right.
Who was a Montreal broadcaster and a terrific writer. And as soon as you said that, I thought maybe Gordon Atkinson was was writing the history of the Calgary Highlanders.
Yeah, and a great raconteur.
Oh, was he ever?
Yeah, he really could.
Yeah, he could tell a story.
Can you counter? Do the kids challenge you in a class? David, do they try and challenge you? Like if like I for example, I don't know how many arguments I've had about Churchill. There's a lot of, there, I guess it's in, I suppose some of it is subjective, but there are some people that think, Churchill had, I've had a discussion with kids who say Churchill was
a racist, a white supremacist, all the rest of it,
and a poser, and he really had nothing to do with the victory. It was, but those kinds of arguments when they come up, depending on how much wine I've had at the dinner table, they enrage me, and I do my best to defend the old guy. Because I end up going, if it wasn't for him, we'd be speaking German. Like
basically your finest hour. Right?
So how do you? I guess it goes back to the cynicism. Do you counter that with facts?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay.
Yes.
That's all it takes, is it?
Yeah, no, you got to bring it in. But in this day and age, you got to bring in the evidence. And you have to, in some ways, like I said, you have to let them see it for themselves.
Right.
Especially when they're that cynical or they're that wedded in their opinions already. I mean, that's the basic things. But the other thing, too, is how you bring it across as a teacher, where you can just lay it out. You can say, okay, here are the various interpretations that we have. Let's discuss it. Let's go through that. And that's much more challenging. And they respond a lot better because they're doing the thinking about it, as opposed to a professor just simply, throwing something out there and saying, follow my doctrine.
And do you have to go all the way back to the Archduke? Is that where you got to start?
Close to it.
Really, eh?
Yeah, it is. And it's funny because I remember years ago, there was a professor at Annapolis in the Naval College in the States. And, he would come in and he was, this was back in, I guess, probably late 2000s. And he was coming in, and of course, he'd start his course, and he'd be like, okay, so back in Vietnam, we were doing this, and back in Vietnam, back in Vietnam. And he turned around and he realized that all the cadets sitting in front of him were born after the Gulf War.
Wow.
And he went,
wow,
oh my God, the touchstone isn't here anymore.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the same thing that we're faced with. But like I said, once you lay that touchstone down, the curiosity goes off the charts.
Dave, I want to ask you about one of your two best-selling books, the first of the two, your book about Dieppe, One Day in August, Dieppe Uncovered. Dieppe is, I guess, would be the darkest day in Canadian military history, the raid on Dieppe in 1942. You you basically what's the word I'm looking for?
Strip down the beast and rebuild it?
Well, yeah. And what I want to know is, before you tell us about, what you came across and how you came across it, that you came up with this new perspective on the Dieppe raid.
Oh, boy. Well, that was many, many years ago. And I told you, part of the fun of being in the archives is finding something new.
Yeah.
And this was back in 1995. And they were just declassifying on the 50th anniversary of World War II. They were declassifying all this amazing stuff, like stuff that was ultra secret.
Can I just interrupt for a second and just to give it some context for people who may not be following along? Dieppe, I was taught in high school that it was the war's biggest disaster, biggest failure. And, cost was the biggest disaster in Canadian for Canadians history. In World War II history, and I was taught that it was just a disaster. And you decided
And that the lessons learned from Dieppe were applied on D-Day.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Put it in more context. You're right. It's a one-day, what we call butcher and bolt raid. In other words, it's Canadian troops with some British troops sailing across the English Channel, raiding the French port of Dieppe, which was under German control, and then making it back. Unfortunately, things did not go well on August 19th, 1942, and 907 Canadians were killed in a morning. Now, to put that in perspective, not to lessen anything that happened in Afghanistan, but we lost 150 soldiers in Afghanistan over 13 years. Imagine losing 907 Canadians in a morning.
Good Lord.
So that kind of puts it into perspective. But what really took this to another level was the fact that nobody could really explain the intent. In other words, there were a lot of excuses that were kind of floated out there, and everybody went, yeah, no, that's not the reason we're there. But nobody could say anything. And so when the war ended, because it was such a disaster, basically nobody talked about it. And then as the years went on, there were questions that were asked. And again, sort of half-assed excuses. Well, we were there to, as Ted said, we were to learn lessons for 2 years later. No, that wasn't the case. We were there to support the Russians. Well, not really, not in the sense that you think, or, we were there to another excuse. So, on the 50th anniversary of World War II, they started declassifying what we call ultra-secret material, which is above top secret. So in other words, you have, a confidential secret, most secret, top secret, and then you have ultra-secret. Very limited distribution. Maybe about 10,000 people in the Allied sphere knew about it at the time. And what I discovered was a report about a commando unit, which was really amazing, didn't know it existed, that had been raised specifically to capture material to help code breakers at Bletchley Park, the famous code breaking center. If you've ever seen The Imitation Game.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Great
Alan
film.
Turing. Alan Turing couldn't do what Alan Turing did if it wasn't for some blood and treasure that these guys brought back. So anyway, they raised this unit specifically for that. And as I was reading the report, here was this one tiny little throwaway line that was the beginning of a journey. And it just said the party at Dieppe did not reach its target. And so now, for the first time in our understanding, what we call the historiography, the history of Dieppe, we have a connection to one of the greatest secrets of the Second World War and one of the darkest days in Canadian military history. And so that basically is where my research began. And it took about 15 years and going through about 150,000 pages of material before I was able to test the significance of what this was all about. Basically, in a nutshell, they were putting on this operation to capture material to help Turing at Bletchley Park, which was incredible.
So the raid was a distraction from the real mission?
Well, part of it was they couldn't get to their target if it wasn't for the raid itself. In other words, they needed cooperation of the other units to get to the target. So they ended up building what they call an infiltration plan. In other words, we're going to get to the target, and an exfiltration plan. We're going to get this material out. And the idea was that they never put these operations on unless they were always covered by a larger operation to throw the Germans off the scent of what they were after.
Wow.
The idea was if the Germans ever figured out that they were going after anything to do with the famous Enigma machine and that they actually succeeded in getting it, then the Germans would then upgun or change their whole cryptographic thing. So imagine, playing poker and being able to, read your opponent's hand, every single hand. That was the advantage that the Allies would have with this kind of information.
Let's tell people
think about that.
Tell people what the Enigma machine was for people who don't know.
All right, Enigma machine, actually, it looks like a typewriter.
Yeah.
You can check it out. You can go and Google it. There's plenty of simulators, which are really cool, by the way. And what you do is if I'm sending you a message, basically you will have an Enigma machine. I will have one. And then we have a series of instruction manuals, key sheets, code books that will tell us how to set the machine up every day. And basically, we do that. We follow the procedure, and then we both are, our machines are set up the same way. Then what you do is you just punch your message in letter by letter, and it scrambles the letters. This is what is called encipherment. So you encipher each letter. And then basically, I send the message to you over radio. It's all scrambled, looks like gobbledygook. And then you, because you have the machine at the other end and know how it's set up, you put it down.
So you get a message that says Kerfpluggle.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah. But here's the kicker. And this gives you an idea of the brilliance of a character like Alan Turing. There were two versions of the German Enigma in the Navy, used by the Navy. The first one, called a three-rotor, because it had three rotors on it that helped scramble everything. The odds of breaking this were 150 million to 1 without any captured material to help speed it up.
Wow.
Okay, so to put it into very local terms, it's like winning the Lotto 649 every week for 150 straight years.
Wow.
Jesus, Murphy.
Isn't that unbelievable?
So what were they after exactly at Dieppe, David? Were they after a machine or were they after documents?
They were after the code books that helped with the machine.
Okay.
So basically, by the time we get to 1942, the Germans are starting to introduce a new upgun version. So it's called a four-rotor. And when I was going through the files, I actually had to look this number up because I've never seen a number so long in my life written down. And it was the odds have now gone from 150 million to, get this, 92 septillion to 1.
Septillion.
Yeah.
Septillion. Yeah, exactly. I had to look it up
Jesus.
on the historian, right?
Wow.
That's crazy. And another fascinating element of the whole Dieppe thing is the officer who oversaw the raiding party.
Yeah, well, this was kind of the curveball that was thrown in because the yeah, get ready for this. The man who raised the unit and was responsible for these kind of operations was Ian Fleming, who created the Bond series. So you can imagine in the historical community, when I dropped the name Ian Fleming, you can imagine how many eyes rolled. And you can imagine how difficult it was for me because I had to go back and figure out who the real Ian Fleming was because a lot of people think he was Bond himself. He wasn't. But he was extremely important in naval intelligence, without a doubt.
David, how close? I was always fascinated as a kid by the Gemini rocket program. So that, as a young kid, that led me down the road to Werner von Braun, and that led me to the V2, and then that led me to learning about how advanced the Germans were towards the end of the war. Their technology with the jet-powered Messerschmitts and all of the like, where the technology was really kicking into high gear as the Allies were trying to put an end to the war. How close were they to turning it around?
Well, it's an interesting counterfactual, a what if in history, because, despite how intelligent they may have been from a technological perspective, unlike, and get back to Churchill, there wasn't really a receptive response to understanding how to use that technology at the top end in the Third Reich.
Got you.
I mean, Hitler and the boys were not the brightest bulbs.
Yeah.
When it came to things like that, they were highly anti-intellectual.
Right.
Whereas that's where, Churchill was extremely receptive to science, technology, understood how to employ it. And I don't think there was any way that the Germans were going to be able to, given the corrupt nature of the Nazi regime, where everybody had their hands in their pockets and, where they were going to actually create a systematic way of employing these things. Like, for instance, you mentioned the Messerschmitt.
Yeah.
The Messerschmitt was an absolutely fantastic fighter. Could have changed things in the air. And then somebody got it in Hitler's mind that it would be better as a dive bomber, so he took it out of service to retrofit it.
Wow.
And again, it was not based on anything except graft and greed. In other words, somebody wanted to line their pockets by getting a military contract.
Oh, Adolf.
So there you go.
He was crazy.
Yeah. I this is, now that we're talking about Der Fuhrer, I would like to ask you if you are, I'm troubled by the ease with which people now use Hitler as a meme, as a comparison. We've seen it a lot in the, when we're recording this, the trouble in Ottawa is still continuing, and people are comparing the prime minister to Hitler, and people use the Hitler and his face and his poster as a sort of like an easy way to demonize people, and I think to myself, is that because we're not teaching people properly about what this guy was all about? Is he like a cartoon character now?
Yeah, I think there's a mix, Terry. I mean, it's one of those things like, we take a look at, where do we get that from? Largely, I would argue it comes from Seinfeld, right? The Seinfeld with the soup Nazi. That idea.
I never thought of
no,
that.
but that,
Yeah.
that idea. But that's interesting. I think it's really
Wow.
cool because it's kind of like, taking a certain word
Yeah.
that is extremely offensive and meant something and owning it yourself and changing the meaning of it, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So in some cases, I can understand that, but no, you're right. I mean, a lot of it is being thrown around, like even my kids, I come down on my kids over something.
Yeah.
Oh, stop being a Nazi.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, really?
Yeah. Stop. Yeah.
It's like,
I find it troubling a bit,
Yeah, you need to sit back and truly understand the context of what you're talking about. And that's the key. And that's actually one of the challenges. And I see that in class.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, that's what I was lecturing about this week was the rise of Nazism. What is fascism and the seductive nature of Nazi Germany at the time and why it was appealing. And the students are blown away because now they're starting to realize, oh my God, there's a lot more to this than, like you said, just a meme.
Well, you had mentioned earlier, Dave, that you have to start with World War I. It was the aftermath of World War I that led to World War II.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big lessons I try to impart on the students is never get into a situation where your standard of living is going to drop to the level where a character like Adolf Hitler is going to seem like a messiah.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe I'm getting, a bit more older and fiscally conservative.
Well, I think that has something to do with, my, sometimes I feel like a grandpa on The Simpsons because, if you're anywhere where there's a memorial, and I'm not talking about these last few weeks, but if you're anywhere near a war memorial, it's actually appalling the way some people behave in front of a memorial. And I don't understand why. I don't know. Is that because people aren't taught what a war memorial is or what the
they're not
sacrifice?
properly raised or educated?
Yeah,
I guess.
and that's I want to
They
go.
weren't paying
Warrior
attention.
raised by wolves. Yeah. It's it does.
Well, I guess you can look at it another way too. The fact that we haven't had wars like World War I or World War II kind of in our face
Right.
is a good sign. And maybe sometimes that kind of ignorance may actually be a sign that the job was done really well by those guys many years ago, if you know what I mean. I remember a veteran saying that, or I actually asked a veteran. I said, what do you think? And he goes, to be honest with you, ignorance is bliss. It means I did my job. They don't have to think about it.
Wow.
Most of those guys are gone now, David, and we had Tommy Schnurmacher on earlier this season, and Tommy is the son of Holocaust survivors, and most of them are gone as well. Just the years have taken their toll. And we talked to Tommy about the responsibility of carrying on the legacy and keeping the memory alive. Do we, as the descendants of the people of the greatest generation who won that war, do we have a responsibility as well to keep their legacy alive? And if we do, how are we doing?
Well, you're preaching to the choir, obviously, on this one. But yeah, I think we do.
But as a society, how are we doing?
Well, I mean, that's hard to say. I mean, that's a larger question of just generally the question of appreciation for anything in life. Right? I mean, take a look at the world we live in. No matter how screwed up or how fucked up it is at certain times, it's a lot better than the one that they had to live through. You think about the Depression, then into a full world war, which cost something like 70 or 80 million lives all over the world. And to come out of that and to have, right now, 75, almost 80 years of relative peace, compared to that. That says a lot. And I think there's a question of appreciation with that. I mean, when I was in Holland, and the story with the Canadians and the Dutch. The Canadians liberated the Dutch at the end of the war, but they liberated them from two things. They liberated them from the Nazis, but the Nazis were starving them. So the Canadians liberated them from hunger. And when I was over there, I saw a couple of amazing examples of appreciation, and there's nothing like the Dutch. The Dutch understand appreciation.
You ain't kidding.
Yeah. And the first one, we were filming, I think it was an episode of War Junk. We were at Groesbeek, military cemetery. And we were standing there, getting the drone up, getting ready. And one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen comes up on her bike ride. Dutch woman.
A beautiful Dutch woman?
Beautiful.
Yeah, you never see them.
Woman. Yeah, big woman with a Dutch accent.
What a surprise.
She drives up, and she just looks at us and she says, hello. And she looks into the cemetery and then just puts her arms out puts it up here,
Oh,
puts
God.
her head down, does a little prayer, jumps on her bike and takes off. But the sound guy just looks at me and goes, "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen."
Jesus.
And it was like, in many ways it was. And then we were up there, and Ted, I'm not sure if you ever met Joe Nixon, a veteran with the Black Watch. He was a scout platoon commander, and we were filming with him up in Holton, the Holton Military Cemetery, which is up in the northern part. And it was just myself and my production partner, Wayne Abbott, and we were filming with Joe, and there was nobody in Holton. And he was walking through the graveyard, and we were doing everything. And this car pulls up, and it was extremely expensive. Like, it was just, you could tell that whoever was getting out of it had a bit of cash, almost like a Land Rover. And so as a result, they got out, a very well-dressed couple, probably in their late 60s at this time. And this was about 10 or 12 years ago. And they noticed Joe, and they came over to me. They could see I was talking to him, and they said, did he fight here? Was this a veteran? And I said, yes. And they just go googly in Holland for veterans. I mean, they're rock stars. You know, they'll be putting their babies up as if the Pope is there, just for them to, have the veteran touch their hands. And I asked them, we started talking, and they met and whatever. And I said, well, what brings you here? And they said, oh, well, and you can tell the way they were dressed and what they were driving, they were extremely wealthy. And they said, well, we come here every year. This is a very special day for us. We were kids during the war, and it was the Canadians who liberated us. And we would not have eaten if it wasn't for the Canadians. And this is our wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And we come here every wedding anniversary to pay our respects to the Canadians who gave us the life that we have before we go out for dinner.
Wow.
Now think about that. Two people with the means to be anywhere else in this world who will every year come to the Holton Cemetery just to say thank you to the men who risked their lives from across an ocean that had no skin in the game, so to speak, because they stood up for principle.
That's some gratitude for you.
I have every year I see the pictures, and I don't know what the occasion is, where children bring candles to the graves of the Canadians, and
that's in Holland as well.
In Holland, these are the Dutch children are taught from a very young age, and it's passed on from generation to generation. And the very first time I was overseas, the very first time I took a trip to Europe, we landed in Amsterdam and found ourselves, not too long after we were in a hotel. They recommended a bar down the street, and we wandered into that bar and sat down and said we wanted to try a Dutch beer, a popular Dutch beer. What could he recommend? And the bartender said, "Where are you from?" And we said, "We're Canadian." And he said, "I have just the thing for you." And he put 2 beers down in front of us, and we went to pay for it. And he said, "No, Canadians don't pay for drinks in my bar."
And that's 50 years after the war.
Yeah, and Ted and I talk about how as we get older, we cry easier. It's putting a giant lump in my throat because the appreciation of that sacrifice is important to me, and that's why I asked you the question of how we could pass it along, because the Dutch are, as you said, rock stars at this, that they teach kids from a very, very young age that they owe the Canadians a debt of gratitude, the Canadians who were born over there.
Should I talk about Merson Automotive while you pull yourself together?
Yes, you should.
Merson Automotive, one of our returning sponsors on the Standing By Terry and Ted podcast, and we thank them for that. Terry and I have been doing business with the Mersons for at least 25 years. They're a third-generation family business. Tires are their specialty, but they also do all manner of automotive maintenance and repairs at their shop on Saint-Jacques, just west of Cavendish. They can do old school internal combustion engine cars. They can do electric cars, and we're going more and more in that direction. And Merson's mechanics are trained and equipped to take care of your electric vehicle. And as I like to say, if you drive the Flintstone car, they can fix that for you, and they've got a podiatrist on site to have a look at your feet, because those are the brakes, don't you know?
Go see them before you hear this. Remember that when you were a kid, you turned the key?
Yeah. They're online at mersonauto.com.
David, how did you get interested in this when you were a kid? What turned your sights towards history?
Always a passion. Always a passion.
Where'd it come
also
from?
too, my family, I've got a bit of a military history in the
Okay.
family. And that always helped, like grandfather and his brothers in World War I, my father and uncle in the Navy in World War II, uncle in Korea, cousins in the Gulf War. And then, of course, I ended up, doing something silly and joining the Black Watch many years ago, where I did 2.5 years of just looking good in a uniform. And then I ended up continuing on, and that was about it. But it's just, it was the stories, but also, too, it was the fundamental appreciation right from the start. There was just something different. You know what I mean? There was something different. And it was just always a passion. And I'm fascinated by decision making. I'm fascinated by leadership, responsibility, and the principles that were behind what they were doing.
What's our military's current shape? Are we in good shape military-wise, would you think?
Have we ever been? Really,
I don't know.
In peacetime, the Canadian Army is never in the best of shape during peacetime. That's just the way it is. We're based on a militia culture where basically it's about 10% regular force and then 90% ready to expand.
Right.
So, when I was in 30 years ago, it was horrible. It was retrenchment, budget cuts. We didn't even have, blanks to run around. We were screaming bang, bang budget cuts. And it's kind of the same way. Well, I don't know if it's the same way now, because remember, we've just come out of a 15-year war. So there's a lot of institutional memory that's still around and a lot of the lessons learned. So our sharp end is very sharp.
Wow.
For instance, JTF2 and our special operations, which are in Ukraine right now, they are as good as anybody on the face of the earth, but it's just, and their Navy and our Air Force, but we're relatively small. We can pack a punch.
I would like to start a petition to buy the poor buggers who fly the Snowbirds new planes. They're flying like 66 Pontiacs, those poor guys.
Those old Tudor jets?
Yeah, those old Tudor jets. I've been waiting for because the Snowbirds is another thing that makes me cry. When the Snowbirds go overhead, it's like, there they are, there's the Snowbirds. And I always think it's time for new jets for those boys, those men and women. It's about time that they had new aircraft.
You're right, though, Dave. Times have changed. Times changed from wartime to peacetime. I recall hearing, and you can tell me if this is correct or not, I think it is, at the end of World War II, Canada had the third largest Navy in the world.
Yeah, that's true. And the fourth were the Hare Krishnas. So, you know what I mean? It's like
mainly because the Japanese and German navies were at the bottom of the ocean.
And the Italians. You forget the Italians.
That's true. They had quite a formidable navy in the beginning, didn't they?
As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, the British ranked the Italian Navy as their number one foe going into the war. The Italian Navy, the Japanese Navy, and the Germans were 3. But yes, you're right. In terms of numbers of vessels, the Canadian Navy was the third largest navy on the planet at the end of the war.
But we didn't have battleships or cruisers, or we had what, Corvettes and destroyers?
Mostly Corvettes, destroyers, and a couple of cruisers, including one that my dad was on.
Oh, really?
HMCS Prince Robert, which actually has quite a very interesting story in the Pacific and Pearl Harbor, believe it or not. But
here's a question for you, and I saw you talking with some other historians online about this the other day. What was more important in World War II, the Battle of the Atlantic or the Eastern Front?
Throwing it against me, are you?
Well, no, not at all. I'm curious too. Is there a consensus or is it an ongoing debate?
The consensus for years has always been the Eastern Front, but now we are starting to look at that, and there's some good arguments. In other words, in hindsight, if we look back, we realize the Germans didn't have the capability of winning it. The perception was completely different at the time, because the U-boat was considered to be extremely potent. And, in certain choke point areas, 1941, 42, it looked like it could have happened. And so the idea is very simple, that, if Russia goes under, the Allies can continue to fight. It won't be great, but the Allies can continue to fight as long as the Atlantic Ocean stays open. because you can use Great Britain as a big aircraft carrier, and you can build up and either attack or prevent the Germans from getting across. But I don't think the Russians have much of a hope if the Western Allies go down. There'll never be a second front. They won't get the vital equipment that they need to rebuild their industrial sectors. Or if it is, you never know how it's going to play out on the Eastern Front. So I tend to argue it's the Atlantic.
Speaking of U-boats, David, Canada played a fairly big part in the merchant marine, didn't we, in getting supplies over there? And that in itself was quite a dangerous mission.
Yeah, not just the merchant marine, but also our Navy. I mean, our Navy essentially was built to escort convoys. Yeah. That's really what it was, in battle U-boats. And that's exactly what they did. As a matter of fact, the new Tom Hanks movie, Greyhound, pays a nice little tribute to the Canadians and the Americans and the Brits who put together. Yeah, just tiny. Dickie. But I mean, you think about it, and and it's funny, my father and my uncle were on destroyers and corvettes, and my great uncle was actually a wireless operator on merchant vessels. Wow. And the stories he would tell my grandmother about, here they were at night, it was dark. You can't hear anything. And if you've ever been out in a cruise ship in the middle of the night, you know how black is, right? And you're sitting there, and then suddenly you hear an explosion, and somewhere in your convoy somebody's taken one. Yeah. And then suddenly the panic on the telegraph, knowing full well you can't do a thing. You just have to keep going.
Hey? That must have been fun.
Crazy.
In the dark of night, worrying about U-boats. I mean, the bravery of those men. Yeah. It's really astonishing.
I knew a guy in Charlottetown, Jim McLean, who served on a Corvette on escort duty, and he was one of those guys who loved to tell the stories. I sure miss that, David. I sure miss talking to those old guys. We were very fortunate to grow up when we did, and to be able to sit and listen to their stories. And I always found they were very appreciative of anyone who would listen to their stories or who was curious about their experiences.
Well, I mean, as a historian, I've benefited from that. The second book I did, 7 Days in Hell, was based in large part on the interviews I did with the Black Watch soldiers who fought in Normandy. And, it's an amazing, there's nothing like personal testimonies to set the stage for a reader to understand tone, to understand the personal nature of what it was like. It's very difficult years later, of course, memory is fallible, to use what they say as fact when it comes to certain things like, here I was there and I was there at this time and whatever. You can't. But you are not going to pass up the opportunity of saying, what it was like for, somebody making their first kill of a German soldier, thinking he would be absolutely elated, and then realizing when he looked down, he saw the face of a 15-year-old boy and realized that was my enemy.
Did you, David, when you were a kid, did you build war models?
Oh, did I ever?
Yeah. Okay, cool. I was just, I was looking at the aircraft on the book behind you and thinking about, for some reason, I was a big fan of the Spitfire and the Mosquito, and I don't know how many, boy, I must have sniffed a lot of glue back then, because I don't know how many of those I built. I was just fascinated by World War II aircraft.
Oh, God, yeah. I did the same thing. I started probably building them when I was about 7 and built them until I was probably about 17, until I discovered women. And then I realized, there's better models I'd be going after. They're amazing. And funny, you mentioned the Spitfire. I was just reading something the other day. Of course, is it Hobbyville? The one in Dorval?
Yes, Hobbyville,
finally is like closing after so many years.
Yeah.
And they were saying that the top selling model of all time, and it still is, the Spitfire.
There was was I with you when we went to Ottawa to see it?
Yeah.
This is another get a hold of yourself story.
Yeah.
Some millionaire British guy rebuilt a Spitfire, and we were invited out to Ottawa to the airfield to watch it, and it did a flyover, and it did another flyover. And I turned to Ted and I said, "It's just the greatest thing ever."
Well, what I remember about that is you and
history coming to life.
And there were some pilots there. There were some World War II pilots there to watch it. And Terry went over and shook their hand and thanked them. And they were almost taken aback.
That's right.
Like, that's how humble those guys were. They were that's they asked us to do that, so we went and did it.
Well, they showed me how to fly it. And, they really were the greatest generation, eh, David?
They were.
They really were. Let me ask you, before we let you go, I want to ask you about the poster behind you because I can't take my eyes off it. War Junk Juno Beach. What's that? What's going on there?
Well, that was about, I guess it would be almost 10 years ago now. We discovered, we went over, discovered, we knew it was there. We just hadn't found it yet. So we ended up digging up one of the bunkers. This was actually the Tobruk bunker, which did a lot of the killing and the fighting on that day. And it was right in front of the Juno Beach Center. And they had a command bunker. And then they also had an observation bunker, but they didn't have the third one, the fighting bunker. So we actually were figuring out where it was. We brought in backhoes. We had ground penetrating radar. We were able to find it. And then we were able to uncover it, which is great because this was right on must have been the 70th anniversary, I suppose. And it was wonderful to be able then to take that back to a guy by the name of Jim Parks. And Jim Parks landed, I believe it was the Queen's Own, right in front of that.
That bunker
was
right equipped
there
with
actually has, like, where you can see we're standing.
Yeah.
Right behind there's a hole. There's a turret.
Yeah.
Well, the Germans basically, when the fighting started, would prop an MG-34 and MG-42 on top of that, and then open up literally at point blank as the ramps were coming down.
Oh boy!
And this actually did sadly, a lot of the killing of Canadian soldiers on that day. So you can imagine how historically important that is to telling the story, right? To genuinely developing what we talked about before,
right?
Appreciation for what these guys went through.
I'm looking for a way to end on a happy note. But
I got to ask him. I got to ask David one more thing.
Okay.
Did I dream this, or are you thinking about putting together a Normandy battlefield tour?
As a matter of fact, I've got 5 going next summer.
Wow, really?
Yeah, we're doing a World War I battlefield tour. We're doing a Black Watch, mostly Normandy. We're doing Bletchley to Normandy. And I'll be doing a couple of Dieppe ones, obviously.
And have you got, is there still space for people if they're interested in getting on board?
Check it out online. Just Google me, David O'Keefe Battlefield Tours, and you'll be able to see them.
Oh, excellent. Sure. I've told Terry that, to me, if you're interested in World War II or in learning more about it, I've gone on a number of self-guided battlefield tours where I go and I stand there and I go, gee whiz, I wonder what happened here. But if you go with someone who actually knew what happened and who knows the history, I went to Sicily with, you probably know David Patterson.
Dave Patterson.
Yeah, he's a retired artillery general and a military historian. And the difference between standing on a hill and going, I wonder what happened here, and having a guy go, okay, on this hill, the Germans had their artillery and their mortars dug in on the reverse slope where we're standing. There were machine guns dug in. Down that road there, the Canadians came with their tanks and infantry, and then they turned and started heading right up towards where we're standing with an artillery barrage coming in at 100-yard intervals. And you could totally picture the whole thing unfolding in your head, as opposed to, I wonder what happened here.
There's nothing like walking in the footsteps, right? There's nothing like it. The best primary source is the battlefield itself. There's no doubt about it.
David, is it as moving as I think it is to stand on a beach in Normandy?
More.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Try Dieppe too.
Yeah. David, it's been fascinating. Thank you so much. As you can tell, I'm a bit of a World War II junkie myself, and maybe we would all bore each other to death if we
we
went on
could.
that
It'd be a hell of a car ride.
I'd be just peppering you with questions. I've always been fascinated by it. It's been fascinating having you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay,
thanks,
thank
Dave.
you, David O'Keefe, and as you promised, Ted, World War II. History and hard to be.
How did you like that, Poseidon? I know you're interested in World War II,
While you guys are talking, I'm looking at all the Navy fleets that were used back in World War II from the Germans, Japanese. Some cool looking ass battleships.
Yeah,
I would love, and I would love to do one of those. Sorry,
Harry Christian, as he said, fourth largest navy.
And I would love to do one of those tours myself. Of World War II, something like that.
Well, there's your guy.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be rude to David, but can you put the slide back up as we get ready to wrap up?
Sorry?
Can you put the slide back up as we get ready to wrap up so that so that we can point and thank our good friends at Jaguar Land Rover. Oh, that's a good plug.
Jaguar Land Rover Laval. We also owe a couple of shout-outs to Matelas Bonheur.
Yes, we do.
And the UPS store.
That's correct.
The UPS store is a new sponsor
Yes.
for Season 2 of Standing By, the Terry and Ted podcast. Our great and good friend David Drucker is, I don't think Chief Cook and Bottle Washer is his exact title, and he probably doesn't appreciate being referred to as such. Sorry, David. But David is the UPS Store Canada. They have 350 locations across Canada, all franchised out to local business people. So you're dealing with someone from your community, and they have home office solutions and home not office solutions.
Yes, that's their slogan.
Which you might have some personal business, as you did.
Yes, and a lot of people make the mistake. They see the UPS logo on the strip mall, and they think, oh, that's where the trucks go. But what that is the UPS Store Canada, and in that store is the guy who will solve all of your small business problems. And even if you're not a small business and you're a couple who are moving and forgot to pack a box of dishes like I did, they'll handle that too. Everything from the size of box you need. They've got boxes. They've got the annoying popcorn filler that they put in. They got plenty of that.
Well, you need that.
Yeah, they've got the tape for everything, labels, and paper for copy machines, anything that has anything to do with running a small business. And a lot of people do these days. You've got merch that you need to ship from place to place. You can bring them all there and they'll handle it for you. It really is a one-stop solution, whether you've got something that you've got to get out of the house and across the country, or you've got to get your merchandise to customers who are waiting for it. They are the solution.
The UPSstore.ca. Now, before we go and lie down, tell us about the mattress we're going to lie down on. How's that for a segue?
Aren't we clever?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm going to be honest with you, because we're always honest on the podcast. It's kind of hard when you're talking about World War II, and while I'm crying, it's pretty...
To segue into a mattress commercial.
Well, it's hard to interrupt that with a thank you to our sponsors. So we find ourselves a little bit backed up. And years ago, in the early years ago, one day I was walking down the street. One day... the very month of May. The hell is happening?
I don't know. I'm enjoying it, though. Do continue.
I was wandering down Scherdenberg Street, and I wandered into a mattress store, and it was called Matelas Bonheur. And I was taken by two things right away. I was taken by the welcome I got, as opposed to the grunt that you get in a lot of retail stores. When you ask somebody a question at a real retail store and you get the, I was welcomed, and I was asked if I needed any help. And I said, I'm just looking around at mattresses and stuff. And they asked me a couple of questions. I came away from it I thought, wow, what a great place to shop. And that store on Sherbrooke isn't there anymore because they outgrew the location. And now they have 18 locations all around the greater Montreal area. And if you're shopping for a mattress, if you're looking for a better night's sleep, if you decided that you cannot sleep on that bloody pillow anymore and you need new pillows, there's lots of places you can go. But if it's for anything that has to do with a good night's sleep, linens, pillows, mattresses, futons, the jump mattress, you can shop online, but I highly recommend the in-person shopping experience you get there. And as I've said, lots of places to buy a mattress. If you want to go to a place and walk around the washing machines and couches and lie on a mattress, you can do that. But before you make a purchase of any kind, find the location near you and let the very, very good people of this family-run business take care of you. Matelas Bonheur at matelasbonheur.ca.
Well done, sir.
Thank you very much. I pulled that back from the very merry month of May.
That was very funny, though.
Thought I was going to break into a little soft shoe.
Holy smokes, where's he going with that?
It's funny, after working together all these years, every once in a while there's a curveball.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you having the moment like I did yesterday?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I hope he doesn't stop talking because I don't have anything to say. All right, I think we're done.
Hey,
we're done
what?
for the season. That was the season finale.
I'm trying not to end it because I don't want it to
I know,
end.
yeah.
It's one of those.
Don't know how to wrap it up.
One of those things.
But I think Poseidon wants to
Yeah,
go home.
Poseidon's
He's
like,
sitting there
yeah,
going,
wrap it
"Christ,
up
boys,
now."
wrap it up. Poseidon, thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure, gentlemen, and thank you as well.
Will you do me a favor, Poseidon?
Depends what it is.
Will you give Pantelis a big kiss for us? Okay.
Yeah, well,
I'll give him a hug.
yeah. Shake his, how about a firm handshake?
We were saying yesterday, we really are very grateful to Mike and Pantelis, but they don't like being thanked. They get like Pantelis gets uncomfortable. You're like, yeah, I'm fine. You guys are great. Okay, it's all right. It's good.
It's true, eh?
Yeah, I'm a little bit the same way as well.
Yeah,
Not
you
as,
are too a little bit.
Not as much as the other guys.
Is that a Greek
Is it a
thing
Greek
or what?
thing?
I don't know.
Or is it just the nature of your
Yeah,
personality?
maybe, eh?
I think it's a little bit the nature.
It's kind of like, can you take a compliment? Some people can't take a compliment. Like you
Well,
tell someone,
I have a hard time with compliments.
Yeah,
Really,
well, there
eh?
you go.
Yeah.
That's
maybe that's
part of the,
maybe
that's
that's
part
what
of
it
the
is.
thing.
Yeah, because I'll take a compliment.
But
Tell
it's
me how
weird.
great I am, would you?
You're the greatest.
It's weird though because I'm a cocky fucking bastard too.
Yeah.
But like I'll be like I don't know, like. But if somebody, let's say I do something well, I'm the type of person to be like, look how fucking well I do that.
Yeah.
But as soon as somebody points it out, it's weird for me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
Well,
that's bravado,
Yeah.
I believe that's called.
Yeah,
Eh?
and it's the same vibe that we get from Pantelis, and it's not like it's not like he fed hungry children in Africa, but for what he did for us, it's a big deal for us because we wanted to do this, and we were like, well, I don't know.
And we would have had no clue.
Yeah,
Left to our own
and
devices,
we
we'd
would've
fuck
been-
up a one-car
yeah,
funeral.
yeah.
So
We would have been in our basements going, I don't know.
Yeah.
So
can you hear me now?
anyway, our thanks to Pantelis and Mike Ward for letting us into their empire. And I said to Ted last year, I don't know, let's see if it works. Maybe people will like it. And according to whatever is Poseidon will tell us about, apparently people did like the podcast.
So far, so good, and fingers crossed that maybe there'll be a season 3 and we can get another free Jaguar or Land Rover for the week, because I like that.
Yeah, let's do it in the summer, though.
Yeah.
And again, thanks to Jaguar Land Rover Laval, Matelas Bonheur, the UPS Store Canada, and our friends at the Mersons, to Cara and the Celso and the family there. Thanks so much for your support. And listen, if you've been listening to the podcast, thank you. We appreciate that very much.
Standing By, the Terry and Ted podcast, is sponsored by Jaguar Land Rover Laval, where the luxury is unmistakably British, but nobody wears a top hat or a monocle.